Hi everybody, I'm Anna Kachikian and this is the Anna Report, where every Wednesday I sit with you guys and we discuss dating and relationships. And this week's topic is vulnerability, and I'm so excited because I'm going back to my original roots of journalism, where I've got the expert in the house. And because the topic of vulnerability is so sensitive, it's so deep, it can get really intense. I love that she's here with us to really dive deep and understand vulnerability with men and love and relationships. So Ani from Hypno Associates is here. Do you guys remember right before I went to Utah with Lily, she hypnotized me because I was afraid of flying, and it totally friggin' worked. She's a licensed marriage therapist, and so vulnerability and all of this talk that we're gonna dive into, she's the go-to person, and I'm super excited because for once, after a year and a half of doing the Anna Report, we've got the expert I'm calling her the voice of God today. Nada! Ani, would you like to be the Buddhist voice of God?
How about
The Muslim, Christian, Jewish? You want to be the, a little bit of everything. I hear someone, but how do I know it's really her? Well. That's why it's so cool. She's the voice of reason, everybody. I need a drink. I've got my tequila today. So with intimacy, I think a lot of times immediately when people, especially men, think of intimacy, they jump the gun and they think of sex. But that's not all intimacy is. Intimacy is also the sort of the emotional understanding, the spirituality behind it, right? It's not just about the sex. So a lot of times when you hear people saying, I was with this person, but there was just no connection. It was so dry. There was no passion. It was the intimacy lacking. And part of the reason why the intimacy lacks is because of the vulnerability aspect when you're in a relationship. Ani, does being intimate also mean you're giving away your power?
I don't think so. I think you're actually strengthening your power through the connectedness that you're developing with the other person.
Because men associate intimacy with intercourse. And so when you tell them, no, actually intimacy means your emotions and your vulnerability, then it's the sense of like, oh, I don't want to give my power away. Like, I want to make sure like I'm the man. So I just want to make sure that they understand that when a guy is intimate the right way, it doesn't mean that they're giving away their power as far as their masculine power,
No, I think there's levels to intimacy. Like, emotional intimacy is way more powerful than physical intimacy. And in the sense of...
That's true, but how can we get them to really understand that and be able to apply it, right? Emotional versus physical intimacy.
We're going to break it down because physical is just a physical act.
Yep.
And emotional is actually being vulnerable. Emotional is opening up to a safe person and allowing that person into your life on many layers and allowing that person to share your life with you, and that is a deeper form of intimacy than just something physical. You can't consider a one-night stand an intimacy, intimate relationship.
Can one be intimate without giving up their freedom and confidence?
Of course.
And earlier we were talking about what was her name? Brene Brown. She has this talk where she talks about connection and how it all starts with connection, right? So we're all in this world to connect. We're human beings. That's all we seek. We seek connection. Like, let's just get that out of the way. If you are not seeking any sort of human connection, you need to seek help like right away. She talks about how connection is related to shame, that if you connect and if you disconnect from someone, there's no sense of connection, then the guy might feel shameful. So meaning if he tries to connect with a girl and she shuts him down, then he's gonna feel shame. So therefore he's not gonna connect and then close himself off from being vulnerable.
Exactly. But you're taking that rejection as a form of shame. So you have to take it as you can look at it from different perspectives in the sense that maybe it's not anything personal. Maybe it's something.
But it's never personal.
It's not,
I mean, anytime I've ever told a guy I'm not interested, it was never personal.
Yeah, but
ever.
The person takes it personally, and the person will take it as rejection, and therefore they close off. And
They shut down.
They shut down, and they feel ashamed for putting themselves out there. There's the shame factor,
Yeah.
and then they're closed off to vulnerability.
Yep.
And the next person gets the wrath of that.
Brene also talks about how in our culture we're just so immersed in the world of like, well, I'm not rich enough, I'm not hot enough, I'm not handsome enough, I'm not tall enough, I'm not this enough, right? And that really affects the connection and the shame and the worthiness. And how people who have like a high, like they feel worthy, like me, I was listening to this talk and I was like, I got this. Like, I feel worthy. I am not affected. Like, if you dismiss me, I don't take it personally whatsoever by anyone. Well, unless if it's my mom. So a common emotion that men feel that they do not address is anger.
Anger is a good one. Because anger is a secondary emotion.
What does that mean?
Secondary meaning anger is like a symptom of what you're feeling. It's like you're hurt, or you feel rejected, or you feel abandoned, or for whatever.
So if a man doesn't address anger, what happens?
Resentment.
Does it turn into the Las Vegas shooting?
It could. I mean, depends on how you process it. It depends on how you process it. It depends on how you approach it and how you deconstruct what happened and relate to it. If you take it as a deep form of rejection, of course you're gonna spaz out.
Yeah.
But
and then our culture with men, right? We were talking about this earlier. How in our culture with men, we train our guys to suppress feelings,
not show weakness.
and it turns into anger. It always converts to anger, no?
Anger is something that you're acting out because you're feeling a certain way. So when you feel rejected or unwanted or something like that, there's pain, and that pain translates to anger, and you act out. So it's not that you're an angry person, it's just how you're acting out from what you're feeling. You don't know how to process it. Anger is a secondary emotion.
I love what Ralph said on the topic of anger. It builds up.
It does build up because it's like...
And it happens to guys all the time, like that built up anger.
Of course. That built up anger because they're not dealing with the underlying issues.
Well, how do you deal with it, right?
You have to process it. You have to, if you're unable to see a professional to be able to kind of sift through all of the issues that you're feeling and process it normally, you have to really do some soul searching yourself and figure out why you're feeling the way you're feeling.
But when you say speak to a professional, but who else can like let's just try to figure out who are some safe people that men could go to talk and be vulnerable, because like Brene said, anger and vulnerability, like feeling not worthy, shame, all those things, when you feel those, when you numb those feelings, like a lot of people, like you said, like Ralph, you said built up, right? That built up sort of anger. When you numb it, it builds up.
Of course.
And she says the same way that you numb those feelings of anger, shame, all that stuff, you're also numbing happiness and joy. So when you're like, why the fuck am I not happy? What's wrong with my life? Why can't I snap out of it? I've numbed the pain. Well, guess what? You've also numbed the happiness too. So unless you can't have one without the other, There are no good days without bad days. It's the same, basically the principle.
You gotta feel both.
You have to feel both.
Let it go through you.
And it's okay. A lot of men feel intimidated and overwhelmed with like the feelings of love, because they feel like commitment and relationship with like love is like the godfather of vulnerability, right? And when it comes to love, there's a lot of intimidation.
Of course.
With men especially, because then they're putting themselves out there.
Of course.
And it can be really, really, really scary. Rightfully so, right?
If you don't put yourself out there to experience the good as a fear of like running away from the pain that it might cause, you're gonna run away from the pleasure it might cause.
Exactly. That kind of proves the point of when the stats that show the guys who have more guts to go up to a girl and ask her out have more sex than the ones who are intimidated, statistically, right?
Okay.
It's
a numbers game, though.
It's a numbers game, exactly. The more you ask, the more sex you'll get. It's the same thing. If you don't put yourself out there, you're not gonna feel the good, you know? When I'm with a guy who's incapable of intimacy, to me, the relationship has hit a dead end. Personally, for me, it just goes nowhere. You know what this reminds me of? Sometimes, do you guys feel this way? Sometimes I feel like I'm in like a TV show when it's real life, and I envision like putting myself out of the situation and pretending like I'm in a show. So sometimes, like, when there's a guy who just has zero passion, like the guy has zero passion, I just imagine like taking like some Himalayan salt and just like sprinkling it on him, some sriracha, and just being like, here you go, let me spice up your life. so, you know what I mean? Like, it happens all the time where I feel like, dude, where is the love and the intimacy, the passion? Like, how do I get it out of you? And then I realize it's not my job to get it out of him.
No, it's a wall. There's a wall up.
The wall, yeah, there's a wall.
You gotta climb that wall.
There's a wall. How can a woman help a guy break those walls? And can she? You know, if I'm with a guy who is having trouble being vulnerable, okay, how can I help him out? And can a woman help him out?
I think you could do your part. I don't think that you're there to save anybody, and that's the worst thing that you can think going into a relationship. Yep. That you're there to fix him. So you never go into a relationship thinking, I'm gonna fix this guy. What you can do is you can be
right. I'm not gonna listen. This is not the project.
Nope.
Nobody wants a project.
You gotta make him feel safe. That's what it comes down to. First of all,
so the woman should make him feel safe.
You should make everyone feel safe as a person.
Yeah.
That they can be open with you and you're not going to judge them on it. So it's not just make him feel safe as it's your duty in the relationship. It should be your duty overall with anyone you come across.
Absolutely.
So you make the person feel safe. You yourself are vulnerable. So the best thing you can do is model the behavior you want to see from somebody in all aspects of life, in all relationships, not just the romantic one.
And just to clarify, guys, when Ani and I are talking about you being vulnerable, do not be vulnerable on the first date, the second date, or the third date. I am not your girlfriend. I'm not your wife. This is not a pity dinner drink thing. Don't get all weepy. Like, when we talk about, you know, vulnerability and confidence, like, that's kind of what we're referring to. Don't be like, well, Anna told me to be vulnerable, so I was, and she totally didn't call me back. Like, there's a time and place to be vulnerable too, right? You should do it with someone who you feel safe with.
Exactly. You should be vulnerable with who you feel safe with. You should be vulnerable overall in general, but kind of scope out the situation first, see what you're dealing with. You don't want to bring a lot of baggage into the first date. Just like you wouldn't want the same in return. So kind of have a sense of a person, develop a relationship, develop a connection with the person, and then let them into your world. But don't come off so closed off in the beginning either. You should leave a little bit of room for the person to know that there's more to you.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with a man opening up, but the key is to know when you do it and whom you're doing it with. And when we talk about vulnerability, there's so many different specs of vulnerability, right? Like, for example, I talked about on my Instagram and Facebook today how I made myself vulnerable yesterday, got in front of a ton of people, right? Like, spoke. That's a form of vulnerability. But we're talking about in dating and relationships with men. with women, men with women, there's a time and place for it too. There, it's, you know, and I don't. I'm talking about, like, what's a good example of something you shouldn't be vulnerable about on a first date? Like, should a guy sit there? I don't think a guy should sit there on a first date and talk about how his ex-girlfriend cheated on him and start crying.
No, that's inappropriate. That's inappropriate.
She's like, that's inappropriate. You know, like, so I just want to give some examples for the guys so they understand, like, what are some appropriate vulnerable conversations you could have with a woman on a first date and things you shouldn't talk about on a first date.
You shouldn't talk about things that are super personal, like past relationships, past heartache. I mean, in depth, you can touch base on it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just don't get stuck on it. You can talk about a little bit about your past in terms of your family, your culture, growing up. That kind of gives somebody a little room to move into your life. You're inviting them in to get to know about you, but you're not talking about childhood trauma or family feud or something that's so personal. You're just giving them a little bit of who you are and your background, just to see if you guys are compatible.
So
a little bit of self-disclosure is okay. You just don't need to sit there and like talk about really personal things. That's something that comes down the line when you've developed a really good connection with the person and you feel safe and the relationship is moving forward and that person displays the same in return. Honestly, it just comes down to being true to yourself. It just comes down to being comfortable with who you are.
Feeling worthy.
Feeling worthy.
If you feel worthy and you're like, screw you, bitch, I don't care if you don't like me, like that.
No, that's just being an asshole. No, you don't need to go in with that attitude, but you need to be confident because the person in front of you can tell that you're confident. You can be...
But how can you be confident and vulnerable at the same time?
Because you're secure with your insecurities.
Bam! Because you're secure with your insecurities. That's it. We're done with the show.
Like, I know I have these flaws and I'm totally okay with it. I've accepted myself the way I am.
Yep.
Everyone has flaws. No one is perfect. And I like the way I am. I like who I am. I'm working on who I am to be a better person.
Exactly.
And I'm okay with that. I'm not trying to be somebody else.
2 ways that men suppress vulnerability, and what happens is the guy who basically suppresses vulnerability and to make his girlfriend or wife happy just starts buying her stuff to make her happy. Just starts buying her things to suppress vulnerability.
No,
because he's a nice guy, right? He's a nice guy, so he's
trying to be liked at that point. You're trying to be liked. You're trying
because
to
it goes back
yourself.
to shame, right? The fear of disconnecting. So because he's afraid of connecting, he justifies that by just buying her things to make her happy.
You're completely diverting the attention from where you need to be paying attention to in that case.
Yes. So, but I just wanted to mention like the 2 ways guys suppress it and what happens, right?
Yeah.
The other guy is the one.
The tough guy.
The other guy is the tough guy, right? The other one is the one who says, you know, he's tough, but he's also very sensitive because he does not take the, he gets very defensive. He can't take criticism. I dated that guy.
Okay.
He was God's gift to earth. He was soaring every day. I dated that guy.
That's just another tactic to divert the attention away from connecting.
Soaring? Oh, sorry.
No.
But just keep using the word soaring.
It's a great word.
It's a great word. No, it's like my favorite word ever. He basically is the guy who has the built-up anger, right? The built-up anger, defensive, is unsure, he's insecure, and it just comes off as just the tough macho guy. David says, what about people who avoid tough questions with humor?
I think that's just the way you deal with difficulties in your life overall, is to divert it to humor, which is a good way to deal with things.
That's how I do. That's how you deal with it too. We all deal with it. Not all of us, but some of us. But as long as the intent isn't bad, it's okay.
I think it's okay if you're kind of brushing it off temporarily, but you're gonna go back and address it, and it's not gonna stick to just ignoring it altogether.
Okay.
I mean, it's cool to be funny. It's fine, but I mean, you gotta stop being funny at some point and open up.
Yeah. But you have to know with
When to
whom,
do
when,
it.
and when to do
With
it.
who,
Yeah.
how to do it. You know, you don't just
Yeah.
let go.
Mike says, how can a guy show vulnerability without showing too much too early?
Well, you, like I said earlier, you start
Mhm.
opening up about your life, and you start testing the waters with the person in front of you. Are they being vulnerable with you? Are they open to you? Are they a safe person to talk to? Are they judgmental? Those are things you get a feel of as you're spending time with somebody. And you give it in doses, and you see how they react, and then you give a little more next time, and a little more next time. If you see that you're dating somebody who is not allowing you to be vulnerable and you want to be vulnerable,
Mhm.
that's not the right person for you. That's not the right person for you. That's just gonna ruin your life. Because every time you try to be vulnerable, they're gonna shut you down. You're gonna end up resenting them. You're gonna end up angry at some point, and you're gonna end up unhappy.
There you go. Right before we started, I saw my mom on the floor and I'm like, what are you doing, executive producer? And she was looking up the word vulnerability in the dictionary, try to understand it in Armenian. And her definition in Armenian was basically a weak man. And
No, she said, doesn't
What-
that mean insecure though?
bam.
So
Yep.
it's a cultural thing. We're raised in such a way, especially in
Yep.
Not in Western cultures, more in other cultures.
Yeah. And
that-
right away we were like, oh my God, we're going to explain to her after, 45 years why a man being vulnerable is a good thing. That when a woman says to you, man up, then
That doesn't
she's
mean
the
that-
one that she to me, listen, I'm guilty of it. I've told a guy to man up. Looking back at it now, it was immature, right? It was very immature, and it was a lame attempt to basically like cheer him up and say like lift him up and basically get him to like be more confident. But again, it was a lame effort in doing that. David says, Ani, are there topics to avoid early on? Politics, religion, might these topics force your date to be vulnerable?
I think it's.
I think you should
honestly-
always avoid politics
Okay.
on a
so
first date.
On a first date, I say maybe avoid it, but contrary to belief, I like to figure out where this person stands with their religious beliefs and their. I don't really care about the political beliefs because I mean that's something that we can work around. But for me, depending on my belief system, if it aligns with theirs, so I like to ask certain questions that maybe are not something you should ask early on. But I like to know why invest more time into something that you may not want to be in. I mean, you don't. do
It's
it
funny
on the
because
first
mine
date.
has been the opposite. To me, it's like the second I know what religion you are, I don't care if you tell me I'm Jewish, but I don't practice it. I don't care if you tell me I'm Muslim, but I don't practice it. And I don't care if you tell me I'm Christian, I don't practice it. The only one, it's like, if you're Buddhist, you're good, right? Like, you're safe. So, right away, the religion conversation is like, I don't care what you say, you're Christian, you're Jewish, or you're Muslim to me. That's it. But the politics have bit me in the butt many times, and I like to get it out of the way right away.
Well,
if
that's
you
why-
are a Trump supporter, I'm out.
Okay, here's my question. Here's my thing. I'm just overall across the board with all of these things that they say you shouldn't talk about on a date. You shouldn't talk about it on the first date. Okay, you're just kind of feeling the person out. You may not
But some
even
people
want to
don't
say
like
it.
small talk.
That's fine.
They think small talk is dreadful.
Look, here's the other thing. A lot of people nowadays talk to each other via text or phone calls before their first date even. So you kind of get a feel of who this person is and what their belief system is. I personally think it's fine to, you don't go into a debate about it, okay, first of all. You can get...
What if you're a lawyer?
You leave that into the... You leave that...
You just don't date lawyers.
You leave that in the...
Because they're just going to debate.
But you need to figure out if somebody is on board with you before you go on any further. You don't want to invest a month or 2 or 3 down the line. And
Exactly.
So to answer your question, I think that it's definitely something that you don't go full force into on a first date, but you can definitely kind of get a good feel of where this person stands with their belief system and if it's aligned with yours.
Yeah.
I think it's simple. It's what you feel comfortable with. There's some things that are deal breakers for people that are not for others, and I'd like to get those things out of the way from the beginning so I don't waste any of my time or yours. I don't want to get my feelings invested and then later on have to deal with the aftermath of it.
Yep. And as far as like once you're in a relationship, I've noticed that anytime that I've created a safe place for my man to feel vulnerable, I've noticed that the man has always become so much more confident with himself, in his work, in his personal life, with in every aspect.
We have a funny comment here.
What is it?
Says, don't ask how many partners the individual has had. That's a very important thing. That's funny.
I can't remember the last time anyone has ever asked me that question. I feel like once no, not only is it appropriate, but I think once you get older, you just assume a lot.
Or that.
Right? Like
no, but the rule of thumb, it's not going to contribute in a positive manner under any circumstance. So why go there?
Yeah, it's like asking me how old are you?
No.
But again, like to me, I just assume if you're over the age of 30, you've slept with a lot of women. And for me, I it's safe for me to assume that and just get you checked.
Okay, or that. You could just take a doctor with you on your first just donate some blood here. I'm gonna go
take him to what is that thing called?
Planned Parenthood.
Planned Parenthood.
Take a kit. See if they have those kits that you can take on a date with you.
How do we get one of those kits? Do they have it at Rite Aid?
Something to invest in.
Oh my god.
On the spot STD checker.
Can I include it in the dinner tab?
You could just double.
This is part of your tab, sir.
No, but it's important. There are certain questions that you should not ask on a first date. Nothing too personal. You just want to get a feel if you're compatible with the person. You don't need to go into anything too deep from your end or the person.
How can a man learn to be vulnerable if he's single? If he's single, if the guy is single, how can he learn?
I think vulnerability doesn't just transfer into a romantic relationship. Vulnerability is displayed with your family members, with your friends, with your platonic, girlfriends, with coworkers. Mm-hmm. You can be vulnerable and be single. It's all about self-disclosure. Vulnerability goes back to
connecting,
being comfortable with yourself.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable with yourself, if you're comfortable with who you are,
then you'll be okay with the disconnect.
You're okay with the rejection.
The rejection.
Quote unquote rejection that you're going to be experiencing if people don't reciprocate the same type of behavior back to you. It just comes down to security and feeling secure.
And it's okay to feel insecure.
It's okay to feel insecure. It's just a matter, everyone is insecure. There's not one person who can sit here and say they're not insecure about anything, and if they do, they're probably a narcissist, so you should get that checked. But
soaring!
You're a soaring narcissist. And that in itself is an insecurity.
Yeah.
But it's okay to be insecure. It's just a matter of how does that insecurity play out in your life. Does it affect your relationships? Does it affect how you interact with people? Does it affect your work? Does it affect your social life?
Yep.
It's all about how it affects you and how it translates.
Yep. And that's my suggestion too. My suggestion is, put yourself out there with complete strangers, give it a try. And honestly, you'll notice that you actually catch people off guard because people are so not used to connecting with other people that when you do try to do this, try this vulnerability thing by putting yourself out there and being okay with feeling insecure, people actually respond well to it.
People like seeing that though. The right type of people like seeing that because people can value how much it took for you to do that.
But do you think a lot of people value that?
Do you really care what they think?
I don't, but to me it's even when I get shut down,
Mm-hmm.
I still walk away fulfilled because I tried connecting.
Okay.
I did my part, so
You
I'm
did your part.
fulfilled.
So it's. I know we keep saying this, and I can't stress enough. It's not personal. It's not personal. Everyone
It's not
has their
personal.
own issues. Everyone has their own insecurities. Everyone has their own journey, and they're coming from their own place of hurt. So you cannot take
It's
that
not
and
in-
make that yours.
It's
It's
not
not fair.
personal. I like that. It's not personal. Oh, that was really interesting. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Ani, for coming, and Hypno Associates. Can I get hypnotized tomorrow? All right, you guys. So thank you so much. Have a good night, and I will see you on Instagram. I will see you on Facebook. I will see you on Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm loving LinkedIn.